When I was 17, my mother died. It wasn't sudden, and it wasn't unexpected. She had been sick for a long time, battling an illness that drained her strength day by day. Watching her fade away was the hardest thing I had ever endured. Even now, I don't know what hurt more: the pain of losing her or the helplessness of knowing there was nothing I could do to stop it. She was my world. And then, just like that, she was gone. After the funeral, everything changed. My father was devastated. He tried to be strong for me, but I could see the weight of his grief pressing down on him, making him smaller, quieter. He worked hard, but his job didn't pay much. If it weren't for my mother's family, I don't know how we would have survived. They stepped in immediately, taking care of us in ways we didn't even know we needed. My uncles and aunts helped with money, food, and anything else they could provide. They made sure we never felt alone. But the person who helped the most was my Aunt Vivien. Aunt Vivien was my mother's older sister, and unlike the rest of the family, she wasn't just comfortable. She was rich. The kind of rich that meant she never had to check price tags, and people treated her like royalty wherever she went. She had built a successful business empire and had more money than she could ever spend. She didn't have children of her own, and after my mother's death, it was like she decided to take us under her wing completely. She bought us a new house. Not just any house, but a beautiful, spacious home in a good neighborhood, big enough that my father and I could have separate spaces to grieve and heal.
You need a fresh start. You can't keep living in a place where every room reminds you of her.
My father had resisted at first, but Aunt Vivien was relentless. She wanted us to move forward, to rebuild our lives, and the new house was her way of making sure we had the foundation to do that. We settled in quickly. My father continued working hard, trying to make life as normal as possible for me. And despite everything, he took care of me well. He made sure I had everything I needed, and we were okay. Not rich, not even comfortable, but we got by. Things weren't perfect, but we had each other. For 2 years, that was enough. And then, when I turned 19, my father met Rebecca. At first, I didn't mind. She seemed nice enough. She was soft-spoken, always polite, and she never tried to act like my mother. She treated my father well, and as long as he was happy, I had no reason to dislike her. The problem wasn't Rebecca. It was her daughter, Annie. Annie was my age, but that was the only thing we had in common. From the moment we met, we clashed. She was rude, entitled, and spoiled. She acted like she was better than me, even though she and her mother weren't exactly well off. She didn't like me, and I didn't like her. But while I only responded when provoked, Annie went out of her way to make sure we couldn't get along. Every conversation turned into an argument. Every interaction was a battle. She was nasty, and I had no problem returning the favor. So when Rebecca and my father got married after a year of dating, I was relieved that Annie didn't move in with us. Apparently, she preferred staying with her grandmother, and I silently thanked the universe for small mercies. For 6 months, things were okay. Not great, but manageable. And then my father died. It happened so fast that I barely had time to process it. One day he was tired, stressed, overworked, but still here. The next he was gone, collapsed at work and never woke up. The doctor said it was exhaustion. His body had been pushed too hard, too fast, for too long. He had been working extra hours, trying to provide for all of us, and in the end, it was too much. He died from being overworked. I should have known things would change after my father's death. I should have seen the signs. The way Rebecca barely looked at me during the funeral, the way she only spoke when necessary, the way she clung to the people offering their condolences as if she were the only one grieving. But I was too lost in my own pain to notice. And then, the very day after we buried my father, Rebecca changed completely. Gone was the polite, soft-spoken woman my father had married, the woman who had smiled and nodded and pretended to care. In her place was a cold, bitter stranger. At first, I thought maybe she was just grieving in her own way. Maybe she was struggling, like me, trying to figure out how to move forward. I was wrong. She wasn't struggling. She wasn't grieving. She was waiting. She'd been waiting. Waiting for the moment she could drop the act. Waiting for the moment when no one would be watching. And when she realized that Aunt Vivien and the rest of my mother's family trusted her to take care of me, she finally showed her true colors. She brought Annie into the house.
Rebecca, are you sure about this? Will you be able to take care of both girls? Of course. Jane is like a daughter to me. I would never treat her any differently from my own child.
I should have known she was lying. Because the moment Aunt Vivien left, she turned to me with a look I had never seen before. A look of contempt. That was the beginning of my personal hell. Annie wasted no time making herself comfortable. She took the biggest bedroom, which was my bedroom. I came home after a walk one evening to find my things shoved into boxes and dumped into the smallest room in the house. What is this?
Oh, I thought you'd be fine with the guest room. Annie needs space.
But this is my room.
Not anymore.
Rebecca had just stood there watching as Annie crossed her arms and looked me up and down like I was the guest in my own home. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. But something in Rebecca's eyes told me it wouldn't matter. So I swallowed my pride, took my things, and moved into the tiny, cramped space Annie had so generously left for me. That was just the beginning. The kitchen became another battlefield. If I left something in the fridge, Annie took it. If I tried to cook for myself, Rebecca would suddenly decide that Annie was hungry and needed to eat first. I started eating in my room just to avoid them. It didn't help. Annie would come in uninvited, throwing my clothes around, knocking things over, acting like she owned the place.
You know, you don't even belong here. This house is my mom's now, which means it's mine too.
I ignored her at first. I thought if I didn't react, she would get bored. But she didn't. She escalated. 3 months after my father's death, Annie forced me to get a part-time job. When Auntie Vivien heard about it, Annie didn't let me explain. She lied that I wanted something to take my attention away from the sadness of losing my father. That was a lie, but I had to agree with her. One evening, I came home late from my part-time job and found my mattress missing. Not just the sheets, the entire mattress. Where is my bed?
Oh, we threw it out. Annie said it was old and ugly. You should be thanking her.
Where am I supposed to sleep?
I don't know, Jane. Maybe you should start figuring things out on your own already. You know, maybe moving out or something.
That was when I knew. This wasn't just about them being cruel. They were also trying to get rid of me. The next few weeks were a nightmare. I started coming home later and later just to avoid them. But no matter what I did, Rebecca always found new ways to make my life unbearable. Rebecca made me pay rent every month from my job, and I noticed that Annie steals my credit card when I'm not home to buy herself nice outfits. She cut off the Wi-Fi. She stopped buying groceries. She even went through my things and threw away anything she thought I didn't need. And Annie? Annie enjoyed every second of it. I held on for as long as I could. I told myself that I could endure it, that I could push through, that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. But they never did. Rebecca and Annie only got worse. They wanted me gone, and they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. So, I did the one thing I should have done from the start. I called Aunt Vivien. When she answered the phone, I burst into tears. I told her everything. The way they treated me, the way they took my room, my food, my bed, everything. By the time I finished, Aunt Vivien was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke.
Pack your things, I'm coming.
30 minutes later, she was at the house. Aunt Vivien stormed in like a force of nature, her heels clicking against the floor, her sharp eyes scanning the house. I had never seen Rebecca look nervous before.
Oh, Vivien, what a surprise. Cut the act, Rebecca. Jane told me everything. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Huh? I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, there hasn't. I will check and see for myself.
Aunt Vivien looked around. She checked the rooms, saw the difference between where I and Annie were sleeping. She also checked the fridge and saw how empty it was. She turned back to Rebecca and Annie.
You two are disgusting.
I mean, Jane could have told you if she had a problem.
Shut your mouth, you little rat.
Rebecca opened her mouth to argue, but Aunt Vivien wasn't having it.
You have no right to be here. This house was given to Jane's father. He's dead now. You were only allowed to stay here because we thought you were good people. Clearly we were wrong.
And then she did something I never expected. She dashed to Rebecca's bedroom and grabbed her suitcase. She came down and threw it out the front door.
Vivien, please don't do this. I beg you, please. Out. Now.
Rebecca looked at Annie, then back at Aunt Vivien, as if trying to gauge whether she was serious. When she saw the seriousness, she pulled her daughter and both of them knelt down, begging. But Aunt Vivien didn't listen. Together, we threw the rest of their things outside.
Get out before I call the cops and never come back.
They had to leave, They had no choice. And just like that, they were gone. Aunt Vivien didn't let me stay in that house a second longer.
You're coming with me. You'll stay at my place until I finish preparing your documents for college abroad.
Wait, what?
I was already making arrangements. I wanted to leave the house to them, but they're fools.
For the first time in years, I felt safe. I was finally free. But Rebecca and Annie weren't done. A few nights later, they came back. They must have thought I was still in that house. They came with acid, but they weren't skilled at climbing. When they tried to scale the fence, they lost their balance. The acid spilled and poured on them. Annie screamed in pain. Half her face was burned. Rebecca, too. Her fingers were melted. Neighbors heard them. They rushed out, but the gate was locked, so they couldn't get in. They had to call Aunt Vivien. We both arrived within minutes. I was shocked to see them in so much pain and tears. The acid had done its damage.
What the hell happened here?
They didn't even try to lie. They confessed everything. The crowd turned on them immediately, throwing insults and spitting in disgust. They also recorded videos, labeled them as evil, and posted them online. Aunt Vivien didn't say a word. She just pulled out her phone and called the cops. Rebecca and Annie were arrested that night. After getting little treatment, they were later charged with burglary and attempted assault and went to jail to serve 8 years each. They had learned their lesson the hard way. We heard rumors that while in jail, inmates called them monsters and mocked them because the acid had destroyed part of their face, making them look ugly. I also heard that my dad's ghost haunted them constantly in prison. Inmates reported them as insane, and they were often taken to a psychiatrist. Thanks for watching.